welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman.
Oh, yeah, this one.
It's a book that I think changes how we understand the way our minds work.
It's definitely a classic, and there's a reason for that. In this book, Kahneman really reveals how our brains rely on two distinct systems for thinking.
Okay.
A fast, intuitive system and a slower, more deliberate one.
Yeah, that's right. System 1 and System 2.
Yeah,
So, like, imagine you're driving home from work and it's a route you've taken 100 times. You're not actively thinking about each turn, each stop sign. You just sort of do it.
right.
That's System 1 at work.
Autopilot.
It's automatic, effortless, based on instinct and emotion. Like,
Yeah, and then you contrast that with, say, trying to solve a tricky logic puzzle or planning a complicated trip.
oh, yeah.
You're really having to concentrate, weigh options, think things through step by step. That's your system 2 kicking in, the deliberate, analytical, effortful side of your thinking.
And what's so fascinating is that these two systems are constantly interacting, sometimes cooperating, sometimes clashing.
Right.
Um, and one of the coolest examples, I think, is the experiment where they measured people's pupils while they were doing mental tasks.
Oh, yeah, the pupil dilation, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So what's so amazing about that is that pupil dilation actually reflects mental effort.
Oh, wow.
So they could literally see when someone was hitting their cognitive limit just by watching their eyes.
Like, I feel like my pupils must be huge after reading this book.
Right.
It's a lot of System 2.
Absolutely.
But it makes you wonder, like, what other subtle signals are our bodies sending about how our brains are working?
Totally. And Kahneman's work, it really opens up a whole new perspective on the way we think and make decisions. He also talks about these mental shortcuts we use called heuristics,
Yeah.
which are
They're like these rules of thumb our brain relies on to make quick judgments.
exactly.
But here's the thing. While heuristics can be helpful, they can also lead to systematic errors or biases in our thinking.
Right. So think about this. You're scrolling through social media and you see a bunch of posts about a certain political scandal.
Yeah.
And it leads you to believe that this type of behavior is rampant among politicians.
Or totally, even though it might just be a case of the media focusing on a few sensational stories.
Right. And that's the availability heuristic at play.
Yeah.
We judge the likelihood of something based on how easily examples come to mind.
Yeah.
Kahneman himself, he even admits that he fell prey to this bias
Oh, really?
when he initially believed that adultery was more common among politicians than doctors or lawyers,
Interesting.
simply because those scandals were more widely publicized.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
knowing about the availability heuristic is so helpful, especially in today's world with 247 news and the echo chambers of social media.
Right.
It really helps you to take a step back and question your assumptions
Totally.
about how common or representative something truly is.
Absolutely. It's a critical thinking tool that everyone can use. Now, another fascinating example that we see is the Linda problem, which illustrates the representativeness heuristic.
Okay, break this down for me.
Okay, so imagine we're given a description of Linda.
Okay.
She's intelligent, outspoken, and passionate about social justice.
Okay.
And then we're asked, is it more likely that Linda is a bank teller or a feminist bank teller?
A feminist bank teller, probably.
Most people jump to that conclusion,
Yeah,
even those who understand basic probability,
right.
but it defies logic.
It does.
It's always more probable that someone belongs to a broader category
Oh,
than a very specific subcategory.
I see.
But our brains get so caught up in how well Linda fits this image of a feminist that we kind of ignore the basic math.
It shows you how powerful stereotypes can be.
Absolutely. It's a great example of how our System 1 intuition can sometimes hijack our System 2 logic. And this bias, it doesn't just apply to hypothetical scenarios like the Linda problem. It can influence how we judge people in real life, in hiring decisions, in our social circles, everywhere.
So I have a question for you listening. Have you ever, been in a situation, or can you think about a time when a mental shortcut like the availability heuristic or the representativeness heuristic led you to make a quick judgment that might not have been totally accurate? Like, take a moment to reflect on that. It's amazing to think about how these unconscious processes are shaping our perceptions all the time.
It really highlights the need for us to engage our System 2 more often,
Yeah.
to slow down and think critically about the information we're taking in. And that leads us to another fascinating concept, framing.
Oh yeah, framing.
The idea that the way information is presented, the frame, can have a huge impact on our choices, even if the underlying options are essentially the same.
Right, like think about the classic example of the Asian disease problem,
Oh, yeah.
where people are presented with two options for dealing with a hypothetical outbreak.
Right.
One option saves a certain number of people for sure,
Mm-hmm.
while the other involves a gamble, a chance to save everyone, but also a chance to save no one.
Right. Yeah.
And logically, the expected outcome is the same for both options. But here's where it gets interesting. When the options are framed in terms of lives saved, people tend to be more risk-averse, choosing the sure thing.
Right. But then when those same options are framed in terms of lives lost, people suddenly become more risk-seeking,
Yeah.
opting for the gamble. Just changing a few words can completely flip our preferences.
It's like we have two different emotional responses to the same statistical probabilities, depending on whether we perceive it as a gain or a loss.
Exactly. Our emotions are deeply intertwined with our decision-making processes, even when we think we're being completely logical.
Yeah.
And this has huge implications for everything from how we invest our money to how we evaluate political policies.
So being aware of framing effects is crucial for making informed decisions. We need to ask ourselves, is this information being presented in a way that's designed to trigger a certain emotional response?
Mm.
Are there other ways to frame this problem that might lead me to a different choice?
Absolutely. And this brings us to one of Kahneman's most groundbreaking insights, loss aversion.
Oh, yeah.
The idea that we feel the pain of a loss more strongly than the pleasure of an equivalent gain.
Right. It's like that old saying, it hurts more to lose $100 than it feels good to find $100.
Exactly. And they actually tested this in the lab using, of all things, coffee mugs.
Coffee mugs.
Yes, they randomly gave half the participants a mug
Okay.
and then asked both groups, those with mugs and those without, to state a price for buying or selling the mug.
So what happened? Did people suddenly develop a deep emotional attachment to their free coffee mugs?
It turns out they kind of did. The
Huh.
sellers, those who already owned a mug, demanded a much higher price than the buyers were willing to pay,
Wow.
even though the mugs were identical. Just possessing something, even for a short time, seems to instantly increase its value in our eyes.
That's so interesting.
It's called the endowment effect, and it perfectly illustrates the power of loss aversion.
Yeah.
We're so reluctant to part with what we possess, even if it means missing out on a potential gain.
Right. And I feel like this has huge implications for our financial decisions,
Oh, total.
for our relationships,
Mm-hmm.
even our clutter at home.
Absolutely.
Have you ever struggled to get rid of something even though you haven't used it in years?
Yeah,
Loss aversion might be at play.
totally.
It's incredible how much our emotions influence our choices, even when it comes to seemingly trivial things like coffee mugs.
Right.
But what about those big, life-altering decisions? Surely we're more rational when the stakes are higher.
Well, not necessarily. That's where Kahneman's research on overconfidence comes in. And he even admits that he fell victim to this bias during his time in the Israeli army.
Wait, even a Nobel Prize-winning psychologist can be overconfident.
It's true. He and his team were tasked with evaluating candidates for officer training.
Okay.
They developed this elaborate system for assessing various traits and felt incredibly confident in their ability to predict success.
So they thought they'd cracked the code for identifying future leaders.
Exactly. But when they compared their predictions to the actual outcomes, the correlation was, well, pretty much non-existent.
Wow.
Their carefully crafted system was no better than random chance.
Wow, that's humbling.
It really is.
So even when we have evidence to the contrary,
Right.
we can still cling to the illusion that we're in control,
Right.
that we can predict the future.
Yeah, it's a powerful illusion, and it can be dangerous in situations where the consequences of being wrong are significant.
Right.
Think about financial markets, political forecasts, even everyday decisions like choosing a route home.
Yeah,
How often are we truly accurate in our predictions?
it's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
But this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the fascinating world of thinking fast and slow.
Yeah, there's so much more.
We'll be back soon to dive deeper into Kahneman's insights, including the concept of the two selves, the experiencing self, and the remembering self. So stay tuned.